Shalom, everybody. Welcome to another Shear in Tanya. I'm Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. So we're studying Tanya, the book written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shear Zalman of Liadi. And this book is basically teaching us the secrets behind the nature of the soul, the animalistic part of the soul, the godly part of the soul, and the challenges that we have in integrating these two aspects in our lives, and how to basically come out and win the war, that we should be involved in matters of goodness and kindness and not fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara, of the animalistic part that we can get so easily caught up in. We're using the text of the Lessons in Tanya, which is published by the Cohort Publication Society, and it appears on the Chabad.org site, as you can see on your screen. Everybody can see the same screen that I'm looking at, and everybody therefore has the opportunity of reading the Hebrew together with me, as well as the English as we go along. At this point in time, we're on chapter 3, and we are discussing the nature of the godly soul and how it basically manifests and works. And last week, we concluded with a description of the Sefirot. And this is basically how the godly soul is divided up. It looks like this. If anybody wants to check out more details about the Sefirot, please take a look at the previous Shiur, where we discussed the aspect of the brains of the person, and then the emotional side of the person, the Keteh, Chochmah, Binah and Daat part of the person, and then the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus of the person. We're not going to discuss that any longer. We're moving on now. By now, everybody should have a good idea of these different Sefirot and how they work. And so we said over here in the beginning that these aspects of the Nefesh, Ruach, and the Neshama have within them 10 different aspects, and these parallel to or correspond to the 10 supernal Sefirot, which descend from them in this chain-like unfolding of events. And these 10 Sefirot are divided into two sections. Haniklakot l'shtayim. They're divided into two sections, as we said before last week. Shehein shalosh imas v'sheva kefulos. They correspond to the the 3 mothers and the 7 doubles. And we said, why are they called 3 mothers? Because the mothers give birth to the 7 children underneath. And the mothers are the aspect of the intellect, which is called the Chabad, Chochmah, Binah and Daat. And the Sheva Kefulos, the 7 doubles, or the emotive parts of the Sefirot, the nature of the powers of the godly soul, correspond to the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Now, we get to this point over here where we said the Pirush, the explanation is that we have, when we speak about these 3 mothers, the Chochmah, Binah, V'Daas, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. It's very interesting to note, if anybody picks up on this idea, that we're not so far away from Pesach. And one of the sentences that we say in the Haggadah that we're reading says over there, V'afilu kulanu chachamim, v'afilu kulanu nevonim, kulanu zekainim, kulanu yodim et haTorah. Mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. V'chol hamarbe l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, harei ze meshubach. The verse says over there that there's a mitzvah to speak over the whole exodus of Egypt. And it says over there that even if we were all wise, chachamim, even if we were all understanding, binah, kulanu nevonim, we were understanding, kulanu zekainim, which is not mentioned over here, even if we were all elderly, or kulanu yodim et Torah, da'at, and we all knew the Torah, still there would be a mitzvah upon us to tell over the story of Egypt. So, people come to the table, Pesach evening, and they say to everybody, we've done this before already, let's get to the meal. Enough of all of this Haggadah. When I was 5 years old, I remember my Zayda doing it. When I was 10 years old, I still remember him doing it. 15 years old, I always remember my Abba doing it. And then I've had enough already. Let's get to the meal. And the Haggadah opens up and says, even if we were all wise, even if we were all understanding, even if we were all elderly, which means to say that we've experienced life and we've gone through what life has to deal us, all the difficulties, the challenges, the growth, still there'd be a mitzvah for us to tell over the story of Egypt, of coming out of Egypt. And in fact, anybody who tells more about coming out of Egypt, so Harei Zeh Meshubach, this person is to be praised, because that's what the evening is all about. Now, I'm just mentioning that by the side, because what we're referring to when we recite that particular paragraph is that even if we were all wise people, even if we all had this attribute of Chochmah, in which we had absorbed everything that there was to absorb in terms of knowledge, we read all the books, Binah, even if we had such an intelligence to ourselves that we could understand one thing from another, tremendous understanding, and even if we were all elderly, having experienced life, and even kulanu yodem et Torah, that even if we came to this aspect whereby we were so fused with the Torah that the Torah was us and we were the Torah, everything about us was Torah. We observe Torah 24 hours a day. We're studying Torah. We're fulfilling the Mitzvot. We're doing acts of kindness. We're so busy that we don't have time for anything that is negative against the Torah. Nevertheless, we would still be obligated to recite the Haggadah on Pesach, and of course, the more we do it, the better, which means to tell us that the story of the Haggadah is one in which we all need to take part. It's doing something to us. Now, this isn't the time to discuss the entire story of the Haggadah, but I really wanted to mention it because of these three particular aspects: Chokhmah, Binah, and Daat. These three sefirot, which are the most important, they apply to our intelligence. And the rule is as follows. Intelligence is what is going to make us the people that we are. Because underneath the Chokhmah, Binah, and Daat, we're going to have the Shivas Yemei HaBinyan, the 7 days of the creation, which is Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. Now, basically what is happening over here, just in short again, to go back to our picture, is that if we pay attention, we see that there is this aspect of Chokhmah, Binah, and Daat, which corresponds to the right brain, the left brain, and then the central brain. The central brain being a combination of the Chokhmah and Binah, and in fact has a certain measure of Chesed and Gevurah inside it as well, because it has kindness and restraint sitting inside it. That's why it's actually connecting over here. And then from here flows out all of the emotions, which means to say like this: if we take a look at a human being, we'll notice that the right brain, left brain, and the central brain are sitting on the top of a person's body. And then underneath that is the body itself. The Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Yesod, and Malchut, which correspond to the right arm, left arm, the body, right leg, left leg, the sexual organ, and then the top of the sexual organ, or however we're going to understand Malchut in different ways. But what I'm pointing out here is that the Chokhmah, Binah, and Daat is the head, whereas the 7 lower sefirot, that's the body, which means to say that if we look at a human being, we see the head, and then we see a connecting device. The connecting device is called the neck, and the neck is what joins the head to the body. Now, the body is going to be responsible for doing all the acts that we're involved in, good or the opposite. Now, if we don't control how the body is working, the body will get out of control and will result in us doing the most terrible things in life. So we need to control the body. How do we control the body? Through the head. Once we get our heads into order, once we get the knowledge that we need to in our minds, and we can think a little bit differently, we think like mature adults, we can think beyond the norm of thinking as just a general person, but we go beyond that and we say to ourselves, we need to think like a moral human being, a godly human being, not just moral, but a godly human being. Then
there's an expression: get your head straight, get your head straightened.
Get your head straightened, right? Exactly. That's a very beautiful idea. It's got to be straight. What does it mean? Once it's straight, then all the flow from the brains will go through the throat and ultimately manifest itself in the body. And it's for this reason that in the creation of man, we see that the throat is very thin. It's very narrow. Why is the throat narrow? Because in order to get the brains to get through into the body, it passes through a very narrow channel. If one doesn't think straight, if you don't get your head straight, as you're saying, then what's going to happen is to push through all of that knowledge, it just won't go. And ultimately what will come through is this negativity, which will eventually manifest itself in abundance through the body. As we see, the body is large. The body, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. Look at the body. The person involved in bodybuilding. So we see that the person is working on himself. His body gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And basically, this is what's happening. The body is that place that's going to express itself and either do tremendous good or, God forbid, the opposite. And this is what he's referring to here, that we have the 7 mothers, the intellect. We've got to get our intellect in order. And then afterwards, so the 3 mothers, and then afterwards from the 3 mothers comes the 7 parts, the 7 days of creation. Why is it called the 7 days of creation? The Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzachot, Yesod, and Malchut? Because these 7 attributes are known as the 7 days of creation. For it was through these 7 attributes that God created the world. Each day's creation came about through a particular attribute. During the first day, Chesed was dominant. The second day, Gevurah, and so on. And this is really what we mean when we say that God created the world in 7 days. It doesn't mean to say, or 6 days, whatever we're referring to in this particular instance. It doesn't mean to say that God is this, finite type of being, and he has to create something. And after he creates it, like he's creating the day, he's putting things into the day. He then says, oh, well, I guess I just finished up my work for the day. I better wait another 23 hours or however long there still is to the day. And then afterwards, I'll create tomorrow. God is creating everything in his being. How he does it in moments. He doesn't have to wait around 24 hours until something new takes place. So what can we be referring to when we say that God created the world in 7 days? We mean he created the world through 7 attributes. On the first day, the first attribute, this is Chesed. The second day, second attribute, this is Gevurah. And these are the aspects that will sustain the world and sustain human beings and make us behave in certain ways as we define ourselves according to the intellect. The kach, and so too, benefisha adam, with regards to a person's personal soul, shenechlekes lishtayim, which is divided into 2 sections, seichel or midas. We have the intellect, and then we have the midas. Just like it is that in the supernal creation, we have the 3 intellect, the 3 mothers, and then we have the 7 parts of the building of creation, so too in the soul of a man who corresponds to the creation. And this is what we say in the book of Eov, that mi besari echezeh elokah, that from my flesh I see God. When I look at myself, I can understand God. I can understand all of creation. I can understand all of existence, because God has created my soul and my existence to correspond with the whole of the universe. Everything is the same. A man is simply a microcosm of the universe. When he understands himself well, he understands the universe. And to understand the entire universe, of course, means to understand oneself. Haseichel, koilel, Chochmah, Binah, and Daat. Now, the seichel, the intelligence, includes within it the Chochmah, Binah, and Daat, Chabad, v'hamidas, and the attributes are the following: Hein ahavas Hashem, the love of Hashem, upachado, his fear, v'yirato, and then another aspect of his fear, ulefaro, and to glorify him. These are the different parts of these different sefirot. Love corresponds to chesed. So, in other words, if we say that a person is kind, how will he manifest his kindness? Through love. Or the opposite. If we say a person loves somebody, how do we show that he loves this person? Through his act of kindness. If a person walks up to somebody in the street and he says, I really love you. Well, what does that exactly mean? That's like the famous story of the person who goes around and he says how much he loves chicken. Well, he doesn't really mean, in most instances, when he's talking about loving chicken, that he loves chicken, that the chicken are walking around in the garden and picking at things and eating food, and he says, I just delight, I love these chickens. What he really means is he loves to cook the chicken and to eat the chicken. So love does not really mean a concept of what we say it does until we put it into action. How do we put the love into action? Through the sephirah of chesed. So love corresponds to chesed, as they are respectively the internal, the emotional, and external, i.e. practical aspects of the same trait. The dread and awe of God corresponds to Gevurah, as they are its inner aspect. So to the glorification of him responds to Tiferet. Once again, if a person wants to show his stand that he fears God, I'm in awe of God, I fear God. So how do you do that? You do that through the Gevurah. How do I do that? I say to myself, here is an opportunity for me to do a particular Aveira. I now have the opportunity to speak badly about a certain person. But instead, I hold myself back, which is the aspect of Gevurah, because Ezehu Gibor, says Pirkei Avot, who is the strong man? Hakovesh es Yitzro, somebody who conquers his evil inclination. He is the strong person. We show our strength through means of holding ourselves back from something which shouldn't be done, and we hold ourselves back from doing that shouldn't be done. This is the gevura. How do I show that I'm in awe of God? By restraining myself from not doing something which I might want to have done, were it not for the sake that God told me don't do it. So this is again the inner aspect, and then the glorification of Him corresponds to Tiferet. The Chabad, when we speak about the Chabad, Nikra'u Imas, they are called the mothers. Umakor Lemidas, and they are the origin, the source of the midas, which are below that. As we said before, when we speak about this idea, many people know you get into a conversation with somebody and they say, what are his midas like? What are his midas like? Or are you working on your midas? People say, am I working on my midas? What do you mean, am I working on my midas? What we mean to say is, am I working on those 7 attributes, the 7 lower sefirot, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus? Am I working on these attributes correctly? What does it mean? For example, when I want to work on myself on an aspect of Chesed, on kindness, do I give overwhelmingly to a degree that can actually overwhelm somebody else in what I'm giving him? That's no good. That's not necessarily a good midah. That can be a bad midah. I need to approach it and say to myself, how can I improve that midah so that when I give to people, people are able to accept what I'm giving them. They feel good about it. They're happy. I'm improving the world. People are generally happy because I am using that midah in the best possible manner. On the other hand, gevura, I hold back. So I can also show my holding back in a negative sense, where I say, oh, chesed is this giving. But if I give too much to people, I overwhelm them. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop giving altogether. So he's really focused on his attributes of gevura. Well, that's no good either. Such a person needs to improve his midot. He needs to work on himself. And to say, while gevura is good, it doesn't mean to say I have to go to the nth degree on the side of negative or positive, depending on which way we're looking at it. We need to improve our midot. The midot are these 7 lower sefirot. Ki ha-midas hein toldos Chabad. And here he tells us the answer. The midas, these attributes, these 7 lower sefirot, are actually the children. They are the offspring of Chabad. The way that we think, the process that we go through in our minds, we generate knowledge, we discuss one thing from another, we become one with the subject, and then that manifests itself in the emotions that we express later on. Did we digest or ingest the material well enough? If so, it will manifest in a beautiful way as it comes out through the midot. At this point, it would be worthwhile to explain briefly the functions of the faculties, Chochmah, Binah and Daat, abbreviated as Chabad, mentioned frequently in the coming chapters. We discussed this. I'd like to read it in any case because it's quite clear and beautiful. So I'm going to read, this is from the lessons in Tanya, and it's expressed very clearly for those who perhaps didn't understand it well enough or want a deeper insight. Let's go through it together. Chochmah is the first flash of intellect. It is the seminal and inner point of an idea. The seminal point of intellect already includes within it all the details and ramifications of the idea, but as yet they are concentrated and obscured. This is analogous to a dot, in which the dimensions of length and breadth are not evident. All that is seen is the dot, although for the dot to exist, it must certainly contain length and breadth. Chochmah is also called barak hamavrik, the intuitive flash of illumination, which is the beginning of intellectual revelation. For instance, we may observe how a person striving to answer an intellectual question suddenly realizes in flash of intuition that the question can be answered along a particular line of reasoning. At the moment of illumination, he is as yet unaware exactly how the particular question is answered. He knows only that he has found an adequate solution to the problem. Another example that I'd like to give of Hokhmah, of let's call it a type of Hokhmah, I'm not sure exactly how we would express it, but this intuitive flash whereby when a person returns to Judaism, somebody who's Jewish, obviously, and what happened to him is he strayed off the path, God forbid, or he was born to a family which, again, didn't follow all the Mitzvot of the Torah, and he barely knew, he didn't understand his Jewishness. And then all of a sudden, one day he wakes up or he's reading something, and as he goes through the day, something suddenly wakes him up and says, this is for you. This is what you need to do. And he says, it makes absolute sense. He says, I see it now. It makes total sense to me. He goes to sleep that night, wakes up the next day, and it's gone. He can't feel that feeling any longer. He wonders what happened to it. That's the process of the Chochmah. The Chochmah comes along and wakes a person up. But now it's for us to take what's been woken up and expand upon it so that we'll be able to make it a part of ourselves. The Chochmah by itself is rather dangerous because all it does is it just gives us a lightning bolt of some kind, wakes us up, and of course, if we recover from the lightning bolt, we may forget the power of the lightning and do away with it. Thereafter, the faculty of Binah, understanding, comes into play. Through cogitation, Binah apprehends, crystallizes, and clarifies the details of the idea which were obscured in Chochmah, until the whole edifice of the idea in all its length and breadth becomes manifest. For this reason, the function of Binah is described as mavin davar mitoch davar, to understand or deduce one matter out of another, i.e. that which was previously concentrated in the obscure intuitive flash of Chochmah is now revealed and understood. After the person fully understands the idea with all its details and ramifications, he must then immerse himself in it. And it's the same idea. This is the Baal Tshuva. What's he going through? First, he gets this lightning bolt that wakes him up and says, "You're Jewish." What? He says, "I'm Jewish? Wow, I can't believe it. What does that mean? What is the ramification of that?" He starts thinking about it. Then he begins to think about the idea, where do I come from? Who are my forefathers? What is the Torah? What does it consist of? What must I do? He starts to think about all these mitzvot, mezuzah, tefillin, Pesach, Shabbos, kashrut, family purity. He starts thinking about all these things. He gets excited by it. But it's not good enough yet. Now he must immerse himself in it, binding and unifying himself with it to the extent that he not only understands it, but also feels it. So long as the person hasn't put this into his emotions and everything is sitting in his brain, he is still far from the idea of what it really means. He's going to have to take the message that he hears in his intellect and he's going to have to pass it through his entire being until it becomes a part of him. Only a person who makes the Torah a part of him will succeed in having the Torah as a part of him. Only in this way can he be affected by the idea. If his understanding points to the desirability of a particular thing, it will give birth to a love for it. If his understanding indicates instead the harmfulness of a particular thing, he will react with a feeling of fear and flee from it. And similarly with other emotions, the faculty with which one thus immerses himself in an idea is called da'as, which is etymologically related to the expression, and Adam knew Yada Eve. What does it mean he knew her? He was intimate with her. What does it mean that he was intimate? It means that he became one in every sense. It was an experience where he is feeling her and she is feeling him in a way that they are bound to each other, a verb which denotes attachment and union. We now return to the text. Ubir ha'inyan. This is the explanation of this whole matter. Ki hine, behold, haseichel shebenefesh hamaskelet, the intellect of the soul, which is this intellectual part, this intellectual soul, shehu hamaskil kol davar, which is coming through and conceiving every single thing. The faculty which produces the seminal point of an idea and the first flash of illumination, as explained above, nikra b'shem Chochmah. It's called the Chochmah. Now, the Alter Rebbe points out over here that the word Chochmah has in it the following letters: Koach Ma. Koach is the Chet and the Chaf, which is the Choch, and then Ma, and the Ma is the last two letters. What does this mean exactly? Koach is strength or potential, power, and Ma is what? Which means to say that the Chochmah is the power, the strength, the potential of whatever there is in it. Chochmah is that concept of that seed which contains in it the DNA in order to break through and bring a child into the world. So within that drop of seed, we have the potential of the entire child developing. That is the Chochmah. When we look at the Chochmah, we realize that if we bind ourselves to the Chochmah already, We have the ability to already see something of what will be in the future. This is the first aspect. Corresponding to the right brain, this is Chokhmah.
Is this Ma here related also to Yetzirah?
Well, I'm not
because
quite
Shear
sure.
also means creation.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's the intention here. Yeah, the Ma is corresponding to one of the ways in which we spell out God's name, and when we spell it out with alafim, which means yud vav dalet, and then hey aleph, and then vav aleph vav, and then again the hey aleph, which is called the name of Hashem corresponding to alafim. Then it comes to the gematria of mem hey, which is 45, which is the world of Yetzirah, as you're pointing out correctly. Whether or not we can say that, I'm not quite sure if that's fair. Chokhmah exists in the world of Atzilut, not really Yetzirah. So I find it hard to believe that this expression Chochmah is bringing us down into the world of Ma. Though I may be incorrect, I may be mistaken, and there might be a potential of understanding Chochmah as it pertains to the world of Yetzirah also. But at this point of time, I don't know about that. I only know that Chochmah is in the world of Atzilut. It is a faculty concerning which one can only pose the question, Ma. What is it? Which means if we look into that world of Atzilut, not into the world of Yetzirah. See, if we look into the world of Yetzirah, we will see there that there is a creation which can be molded in a certain way, and then through that molding, it will come out into reality. But when we look at the world of Chokhmah, of Atzilut, all that we see in the world of Atzilut is the potential of what can come about as we move down into the world of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. For at this stage, the idea in question is not yet clear or comprehensible logically, since its details are still in potentia, emerging only at a later stage. Now, when one brings out the potential to the reality, and the person begins to understand, he contemplates in his mind to understand something very well. You see, here we're speaking about now the aspect of the Binah. So the Chochmah is this idea of there is something there, but I don't yet know what it's going to be. So what do? I begin to immerse myself in the subject until I start to understand what the potential actually is. We could imagine it, so to speak, of a scientist who looks first at a drop of seed, and he says, well, this looks like a drop of seed. Well and good, fine. But then there's a bigger scientist. The bigger scientist puts the drop of seed underneath a microscope. And as he begins to do so, he sees that there's a lot more going on in the seed than he first thought at the beginning. And then there's another scientist, he takes it even further, and he says, hold on a second, it's not just that there's more, let's just see what exactly there is. And he begins to enter into the world of the genetics of the DNA, and he starts to actually see how everything is going to cause a child to be formed in the world once it meets up with the egg and the embryo develops inside the womb over a period of 9 months. This is exactly what's happening to us. Every time an idea comes into our minds, we are going to process that idea in exactly the same way. First is this Hokhmah, where we get this drop of seed, but it's no good. It's only a potential. And so long as we're not going to do anything with the potential, we're not going to go anywhere. So what do we need to do? We begin to immerse ourselves in our mind. We get involved in the intellect. This is the reason why we study Torah. Because the studying of Torah, we see you go to a kollel, the first thing that hits you in the face, if you've never been in a kollel before, the first thing that hits you in the face is there are these men, and one is on the one side of the table, and the other's on the other side of the table, or the two of them are sitting next to each other, and the one is shouting quite loudly about a particular thing, and the other one is shouting back at him about a particular thing, and he shouts back again, yet again. What are they doing? They're immersing themselves in this wisdom. So there's the wisdom sitting on the page in front of them. But they need to understand it. It's not sufficient just to hear this opinion or that opinion. We need to know what the truth is. So in order to understand this truth, we're going to have to immerse ourselves in it thoroughly. And ultimately, that will lead to the concept of the Daat, where we'll become one with the concept. And then ultimately, we'll be able to put that concept into reality. We're not just going to know that there is a mitzvah of sukkahs, to sit in a sukkah. We're now going to learn more about what the sukkah really looks like. And then after we learn about what the sukkah looks like, we're going to discuss it. 4 walls, 3 walls. Can you do it with 2 walls maybe? What about, can we build the sukkah with woods? Can we use metal? Can we use the trees? What about if the trees, put the schach on top of the sukkah? Well, what are we going to use? Can we just take some wood and put that on top? How far does the spacing have to be in the schach in order to make the sukkah kosher or not kosher? And we're discussing all these matters until eventually we get to an idea where we say, this is it. This is a sukkah. I understand what a sukkah is. Great. And now what do we do with it? We make it happen. Comes to sukkahs, we build the sukkah. Then we sit in the sukkah and we fulfill the mitzvah. But in order to fulfill that mitzvah of sukkah, of the sukkah, we need to immerse ourselves in the study of the Shulchan Aruch, in the Gemaras, and so on and so forth, until we fully understand what a sukkah is. We need to do that with every part of our lives. Whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're learning about the laws of Shabbos, whether we're learning about the laws of family purity, whether we're learning about the laws of kashrut, whether it's the laws of tefillin, mezuzah, whether it's charity, it makes no difference. Pesach, it's coming up to Pesach soon. We're going to learn about how to eat the matzah and what the matzah is and how to make the matzah. We immerse ourselves. We know what the concept is. We know the Chochmah. Now we've got to get to the Binah. We've got to understand what's going on. Then we have to fix ourselves and say, this is it. I understand it well. And then it becomes a reality. We have to do this in our lives, in everything that we're doing, in order to strengthen this godly soul so that we do the right thing as we should do, the purpose of our being here in this world. So this is what happens. That is, when he ponders all the details which make up the totality of the particular idea in its length and breadth. Length involves the range of an idea. When one draws down a concept from a lofty level to a lower one, by way of a parable, for example, in order to make it more readily understood, he is lengthening it, giving it a greater range of accessibility, so that it will be more readily intelligible to a student. For a student whose capacity is more limited, one parable may not suffice. It may be necessary to provide a second parable to explain the first, thereby lengthening the concept still further downward. As scripture writes concerning King Solomon, he spoke 3,000 parables. So great was Solomon's wisdom that to explain one of his thoughts, he had to give 3,000 parables. One parable to explain the basic concept, a second parable to explain the first parable, and so forth, until ultimately giving 3,000 parables, an extreme example of the length of an idea. The breadth of an idea means the multitude of details which the concept comprises, as well as its ramifications. For example, the logic behind a halachic ruling in the laws of kashrut may also apply to laws governing financial disputes. Once I understand the concept of logic as it applies in one instance, because my mind is now functioning on a level of logic, I can then take that same reasoning and apply it somewhere else. I'm immersing myself in it. I'm starting to gather one thing from another. This is the meaning of the word le'ishuro, full well, understanding the intellectual concept completely in both its length and breadth. Ul'amko. Thus, we see over here, when one goes into great depth into the subject, mitoch eze davar chochmah hamuskal b'sichlo, through means of some sort of wisdom which he gets in his mind. Now he's got this concept of the chochmah, nikra binah. His immersion brings him to this aspect of what's called binah. Binah is that faculty which elucidates the details of any concept and apprehends it full well and in depth. V'hein, heim, av, v'eim, and this corresponds to the father and the mother, hamolitos avas Hashem, v'yiraso upachado. The father and the mother give birth to the love of Hashem, the fear and the awe, and the dread, as he translates here, the dread of him. Because this intellect that a person has in his intellectual soul, when he begins to immerse himself in it, he goes into great depth in the greatness of Hashem. He begins to think about Hashem. If a person is not thinking about Hashem, forget it. If a person is expecting that he's going to somehow just imagine that he sees God just like that, he just sees him, then he's wrong. Because what one needs to do is one needs to immerse oneself in this wisdom until as one immerses oneself further and further, one begins to see the godliness that's coming out. One suddenly realizes what's there. If a person is hoping, or like we say, people say, if only God would reveal himself to me, then I would become frum. But we know God can't reveal himself. We already discussed that before. It's like looking at the sun. That's the famous story. So look at the sun. Let's see if you can do that. No, you can't look at the sun. Why? What will happen? You go blind. So therefore, put on the shades. Once you've got your glasses on, you've got your sunglasses on, then you can look at the sun. Well, if a person can't look at the sun, which is just a creation of God, how will he be able to look at God? So how does he ever get to experience the godliness? How does he get to see God? Answer, he's got to work with the Torah. The Torah is God itself. The Torah is the essence of who God is in the framework of the letters that are written down for us. As we study those letters and we study the words and the sentences and the paragraphs, we begin to understand who this God is. And through our immersion into the depths of this, we begin to understand the greatness of God. Now we suddenly understand this is God, this is the greatness, this is who he is. And what do we understand? We begin to understand how God fills all the worlds. Meaning to say, wherever I look, that is where God is. Whatever I'm looking at. If I'm looking across the road and I see a tree, God is there. If I'm looking at the road itself, God is there. If I'm greeting a person, God is there. Wherever I am, I realize God is there. When I look at the stars, the planets, God is there also. God fills all the worlds. How God animates all of creation with an immanent divine light and life force, just as the soul fills and gives life to every part of the body. A life force which clothes itself in and unifies itself with each creature, and which adapts itself to the individual needs of that creature. Now, not only is God memale kol amin, it's not just that God fills all worlds, everything that we see, everything that there is, this is God, but sovev kol amin, and God surrounds all worlds, different aspects. In Kabbalah, we discuss these aspects of what's called the or makif and the or pnimi. We speak about the light, which is the encompassing light. We speak about the light that is the inside light. And the encompassing light is a powerful light, a beautiful, splendorous light that is so powerful that it cannot enter into the cleave, because if it enters into the vessel, it will smash the vessel. It's a powerful light. And then there is a light that sits inside the cleave, inside the vessel. This is a lesser light. But God fills all of creation and he surrounds all of creation. Everything around us is godliness. Now we're beginning to use our seichel in the right way. Now we're beginning to immerse ourselves in understanding what life is creation, what is the Torah, what is God, who is God. He illuminates the worlds with a godly light and life force that is far beyond the capacity of the world to receive internally. Rather, it affects them in an encompassing manner. Ways of understanding this concept also of encompassing as opposed to the filling is, for example, when a person can experience something in himself and he just knows that God is helping him. He's got this feeling that God is helping him. This is inside. This is the mamalei kol almin. God fills everything. You can feel it. And then, of course, there are most moments in life whereby we don't think about God altogether, and yet God is sustaining us all the time because he's sovev kol almin. No matter what we're doing or what we do, God continues to give us the energy to continue doing whatever it is that we're doing. And what's the irony? We don't even realize he is the one who is giving us the energy to do those things. This is comparable. This is the Tomet Devorah written by the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovera. He discusses this in his first attributes of how we have to learn to imitate God, where he says that God is called the Melech Aluf. He's called the insulted king. And the reason that God is an insulted king is because he is the king who gives gratis. He just gives over whatever he's giving over free of charge. And what do we do with what God is giving us? We rebel against him. This is comparable, for example, imagine the story that a wealthy man comes to a poor man and he says to him, what, do you need some help? He says, yes. He needs money to do whatever it is he needs to do. So the wealthy man gives him the money. And what does he do with the money that the wealthy man has given him? He takes the money and he buys something and he does something harmful to the wealthy person. He takes the very thing that the wealthy person gave him, he throws it back in his face as if to show, as if to say and to show, as if he doesn't even realize where it's coming from. He doesn't realize the root. When we involve ourselves in things that we shouldn't do, and yet we still manage to do them, it is because God gives us the energy in a way that we don't even recognize that he is the one who's giving us this energy. This is what is called sovev kol almin. God surrounds everything. No matter what things are, where they are, God is surrounding with this powerful energy. And then, of course, there's Mamalekuim, Almin, that God is filling all of the worlds with his presence as well. Sometimes we experience the filling, sometimes we don't. And we have instead the latter, higher level, actually, which is where God encompasses us and he satisfies us, he satiates us with various things, even though we don't perceive that it is God who is doing it to us. This is known as the Melech Aluv. He is the insulted king. He gives us the energy. He's there for us to give us everything that we have. We're breathing. We're able to move our bodies. We're able to see, to hear, to smell, whatever it is that we can do, each of us on our own level. Some people have more, some people have less, some people have even less. But whatever it is that we're able to do, we're doing it through the energy that God is investing in us. If we use that energy against him, we speak words against him, we say that perhaps he doesn't even exist, even concepts like that we speak about, we deny him. This is simply the insult to the highest degree possible. It is like a person who received a gift from somebody and he takes the gift and he throws it back into the person's face as if to indicate, what do I need you for? You don't even exist. And yet what he has is because of this person. V'kula kameh kelo hashiv. And in Bar Hashem, everything exists. It's worth nothing. Everything to Hashem is worth nothing. It's as if nothing exists. In other words, everything is considered to be zero next to God. Doesn't matter whether you're the wealthiest person in the world. Next to God, you are as equal, or I'm as equal as the person who is the poorest person in the world. The poorest person in the world may suffer because he doesn't have wealth. But in terms of God's eyes, there is no difference. Everything is considered zero because God is infinite. And next to infinity, everything is basically worth nothing. So we're going to stop over here. The chapter is going to get a lot more interesting. This is the story that's coming out, the power of the 10 powers of the soul powers, the energy behind these sefirot. We're going to learn more about it in our next shiur.
I just have a question. How could the Alter Rebbe say that it's all considered as nothing when God created, Hashem created all with tov, with goodness?
Yes.
And God created everything for the sake of goodness. So we are not nothing because there's a basic, isn't the goodness worth a positive value?
Well, that's fair enough to say, but we could really say anything that we wanted to as an adjective to describe how things are in existence. I think we could use any type of adjective. But the point is that next to infinity, even the greatest good that you can think of in this world is nothing next to infinity. It doesn't matter where we're at.
So it's being used as a comparative and not as a statement of value. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, relatively speaking, when we speak about Hashem, relatively speaking, everything is worth nothing, no matter how much it is. We can say adjectives like you're saying, that he created the world and it's good and all these different things. But still, next to Hashem, everything that is in existence is like nothing because it's nothing to create for Hashem. He is infinite in being in every aspect whatsoever. And so it doesn't matter where we are at, we are still considered like nothing. The world today that we have of existence to Hashem is considered as if there was no world. Nothing has changed. To Hashem, everything is the same. We imagine it different. We think because we're living, we're adding some flavor to this God, that without us, God would be nothing. But that's not true. And even though we can make a logic out of it, we can say, well, God wants there to be human beings who will worship him, and they make up all sorts of logics that we want to. But at the end of the day, God doesn't need any of this. His existence of infinity has always existed before creation came about. And as you say in Adon Olam, and after all of the existence, God will still continue to be in existence. The process is something that is for God infinite, and in the middle of his infinity is this concept of his creations that he creates. But next to Hashem, all of this is just nothing. That's where we're at. That's what we have to perceive in ourselves. In fact, that will help us to grow and become closer to Hashem when we realize that in the humility is that I'm really nothing. I'm really nothing special. All I'm trying to do is to fulfill my role in life. And through that, I hope to give Hashem nachas. I hope to fulfill the goal that he wants from me. That's what we're learning this for. We're learning this in order to progress, to connect with God, and to feel that special presence that we can feel, even though next to God, what we have is nothing. Okay, so we'll stop over here. And please don't go away. Let me just close off for my YouTube viewers. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Eliyahu Shear from www.lovingkindness.co. And please join us for a Shear again. If you'd like to be in touch with me, please send me an email. I'll be delighted to learn more with you. And I look forward to another Shear. See you soon. Shalom, shalom.